Welcome back for Keeper of the Lost City's Lodestar, chapters 61 and 62. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so that you never miss a chapter. And today, let me know what you think the most powerful ability and skill are. Chapter 61. Keith wasn't going to listen. Sophie could tell. He thought she didn't have a plan, and that everything she'd said was just an angry rant. And a small part of her was worried that he was right. The other part knew they had to find a way to fight harder before she lost anyone she cared about. But that included Keith. So if he wasn't ready to leave on his own, they'd have to plan a rescue. For real, no more waiting for inspiration or hoping a plan would come together. They needed to sit down and figure it out and make it happen, just like when they'd snuck into Ravagog. Between their abilities and their skills and the information they'd gathered, there had to be a way to... A knock from Sandor's front door interrupted her scheming. Sophie kept to the doorway, relieved when she recognized Grizel's voice. It sounded like Grizel had brought their clothes from the Lost Cities, and Sophie made her way down the hall to pick up the satchel. But when she turned to the corner, she caught a quick glimpse of Grizel clinging to Sandor and sobbing against his shoulder as he wrapped his arms gently around her. Sophie ducked back, not wanting to interrupt such a private moment. "I'm sorry," Grizel whispered, her voice thick. "When the news first came through, all anyone could tell me was that a soldier was down at Havenfield, and I thought, I don't deserve your worry." Sandor's voice was choked with fury. "I wasn't there when Brielle and Kadok needed me. I was pacing in front of Luminaria like a fool. Staying with your charge doesn't make you foolish," Grizel told him. "I would have done the same thing." "Which proves we're both blindly stubborn beyond all reason. Not that it was the right decision." Grizel laughed softly. "The stubborn I'll agree to, but the blind part might fall squarely on you. I'm not as blind as you might think." The shift in his tone made Sophie wonder if she should stop listening and give them some privacy. But she couldn't seem to make her legs carry her away. "I couldn't stop you from being assigned to Fitz," Sandor whispered. "But have you ever wondered why I assigned Brielle to watch over Grady?" "I figured it was because she was an incredible soldier," Grizel said carefully. "She was. But we both know that charge should have gone to you. Given the rarity of Grady's talent, he needed our strongest warrior. I should have assigned you to protect him and moved Brielle to Everglen. But..." He cleared the catch from his throat. "I worried what would happen if we lived in such close quarters. Afraid I'd play too many games. Afraid you'd win." The confession was so soft, Sophie almost wondered if she'd imagined it. "Is it really so frightening?" Grizel whispered. Sandor cleared his throat again, drawing at the moment. "I chose the life of a soldier, and soldiers are stronger when they have nothing distracting them. Nothing slowing their hand or forcing caution when the battle calls for risk. See, and I always thought the strongest soldiers were those with something worth fighting for, something to come home to, something they can't bear to lose that makes them refuse to surrender." "I don't know," Sandor whispered, "but I can't stop imagining what I'd do if you were in that coffin. How lost I'd feel." The silence that followed was so charging it had Sophie mentally chanting, "Kiss, kiss, kiss." But real life never seemed to be as romantic as it was in human movies, and the moment slipped away. "Well," Grizel said, "I suppose I should be getting back to Everglen. Queen Hilda gave me a long list of preparations to make for tomorrow." The door started to creak closed when Sandor said, "I haven't forgotten I owe you a dance." "Neither have I," Grizel whispered, "but I won't force you." "You aren't," Sandor breathed. "I can't promise much, but I might be able to handle... slow." "Slow," Grizel repeated, and the hope in her voice made Sophie steal a peek around the corner. She watched Grizel take Sandor's hand and whisper, "I'd be good with slow." Sandor reached up to brush Grizel's cheek, and she leaned into his palm, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. Endless seconds slipped away, neither of them seeming to mind, and when she pulled away, a shy smile curled her lips. "Be safe," Sandor whispered. "Always," she told him. She was halfway through the doorway when she turned back with a teasing wink. "This won't get you out of wearing those silver pants." Sandor sighed. "I suppose that's the least of my worries." She left without another word, and Sandor waited for the lock to click before he turned to Sophie and said, "I knew you were listening." "I figured," Sophie told him, too giddy to feel guilty. "And just so you know, I think you made the right decision. You guys are so... Keep in mind, any comments you make about my love life give me permission to talk to you about boys," Sandor interrupted. "I'd also appreciate your discretion. Now is not the time for such things to become known." "Done," Sophie said, dropping the conversation. "I just want to see you happy, especially after all the sacrifices you make for me. I'm sorry again for inflicting on you. Next time I'll keep a tighter hold until I'm sure I'm fighting a threat." Sandor shook his head as he brought over her purple backpack. "How about instead we focus on making sure there isn't a next time?" Sophie had planned to cry at Brielle's funeral, or presentation, or whatever the goblins called it. She'd even stuffed several handkerchiefs into the pocket of her long golden gown. But sadness wasn't the theme of the ceremony. It was about bestowing honor and celebrating Brielle's accomplishments. The Hall of Heroes itself was a massive Acropolis-styled structure lined with twisted golden columns and filled with golden statues that reminded Sophie of the terracotta warriors she'd seen in the human encyclopedias. Row upon row of gleaming goblins in heroic battle poses. It seemed like a beautiful tribute, until they unveiled Brielle's statue, and Sophie realized the figure was a little too lifelike. Every detail perfect, down to the last curl. "Is that her?" she whispered, fighting off a gag when Sandor nodded. Grady and Adeline didn't look as horrified, but they'd definitely gone pale. "Her body's been aurified," Sandor explained. "It's a process the elves help us perfect. It transmutes every cell to gold, leaving no flesh or blood behind. Only a powerful likeness to remember our soldiers by." He frowned when he noticed Sophie was cringing. "Honestly, how is that different from wrapping your DNA around a seed and letting the tree grow with some of your characteristics?" When he put it like that, it didn't sound as creepy. And it wasn't Sophie's place to judge another species' culture anyway. But she still wouldn't have wanted to be alone at the Hall of Heroes at night. And she was pretty sure she was going to have more than a few golden mummy nightmares. She fought hard not to let any of her discomfort show on her face, since the Queen had given their group seats on an elevated platform, in plain view of the entire audience. "It was wise for you to attend," Sandor told them, when everyone stood to leave. "I can tell it meant a lot to my people to see that the elves care about a soldier who protected them." "It did indeed," a deep, throaty voice said behind them, and Sandor immediately dropped to one knee. "Your Highness," he mumbled, "I didn't see you there." "That's because I snuck up on you," Queen Hilda said, tossing her intricately plaited hair. She smoothed the golden lapels of her military-style jacket as her gray eyes focused on Sophie, Grady, and Adeline. "Please, no need for such formalities," she said, as they hurried to bow as well. "You are not my subjects." "We still owe you our respect," Grady said, as he straightened. "You and your warriors have been invaluable allies." "Well, the elves' knowledge and innovation have been equally precious for our world," Queen Hilda said. "I consider the whole arrangement to be a crucial partnership, which is why I was hoping I might borrow young Miss Foster for a few minutes. The council has informed me that she'll be attending the Peace Summit, and if that's the case, I have a favor to ask." Chapter 62. "You had a private audience with the Goblin Queen?" Bianna asked, sharing a look with Dex that seemed to say, "Why are we even surprised anymore?" "We didn't talk for long," Sophie mumbled, checking to make sure no one was around, eavesdropping. "Queen Hilda just wanted to ask me a favor." Bianna grinned. Of course she did. Despite the attack on Sophie's parents, which the council had revealed to the public to honor Brielle's sacrifice, Mr. Forkle had managed to convince Sandor to bring Sophie to her weekly skill lessons at Foxfire. The coaches were ramping up the training now that people finally seemed scared enough to commit to it. And it made a difference. By the end of the lesson, half of Sophie's hemisphere had achieved the day's skill and cracked small stress fissures on their stones. Sophie had shattered hers completely. The process had left her drained, but it was a good kind of exhaustion. Far better than the 5 restless days she had spent pacing around Sandor's house, brainstorming elaborate rescue Keef plans, and then rejecting them all for having too many things that would get everyone killed. And her check-ins with Keef now followed a repetitive pattern of her begging him to leave the Neverseen, and him promising soon. Hopefully, if her group of friends worked together, they'd be able to come up with something that had a chance of success. But getting them all in the same place was proving challenging, especially Tam and Lynn. The twins had even skipped the skill lesson that day. Tam was using every spare second to search the Silver Tower, desperate to find whatever last piece they needed to make everything they'd learned about the symbol come together. And Lynn had been nervous to leave Wiley alone. Mr. Forkle felt obligated to tell Wiley what they'd learned from Gethin about his mother's death and the Starstones, though he left out any mention of Lady Gisela, deciding to wait until they had a better idea of precisely how she'd been involved. But hearing that his mom likely helped the Neverseen had knocked Wiley to a new low. Garnet had even brought Maruka and her mom back to see him, and all Wiley said during their visit was, "Is anyone who they say they are?" "What kind of favor are you supposed to do for a goblin queen?" Fitz asked, dragging Sophie out of her dreary thoughts. She waited for a group of nearby right hemispheres to wander away before she whispered, "She wants my support during the summit. She gave me a list of all the things she wants added to the new treaty, and asked me to decide which ones I'll vote in favor of." "Isn't that cheating?" Bianna asked. "Colluding before the summit?" "Why would it be?" Fitz asked. "It's not a test." "Your brother is correct," Sandor told her. "The summit is a negotiation, and the best negotiators do their homework ahead of time. I'm sure everyone is determining their allies." "Anyone else stunned the ogres are still going through with the summit?" Dex asked. "I mean, they have to know everyone is going to side against them." "King Dimitar has no choice," Grizel said, and Sophie noticed that she was standing a little closer to Sandor than she truly needed to. "He's claiming innocence in the attack, insisting it was done by a band of rebels. He even sent Queen Hilda a letter offering his condolences, but he knows no one will believe him if he's not also working closely with the council towards achieving a peaceful resolution." She put the last words in air quotes, almost like she no longer believed they were a possibility. But Sophie was clinging hard to the last shreds of her hope. Sure, part of her wanted to march into Ravagog and stomp the ogres into the ground for what they'd done to her family. But another part kept thinking about that eerie golden body in the Hall of Heroes. How many more goblins were going to have to be horrified if the elves and ogres went to war? How many new trees would be added to the Wanderling Woods? If there was any chance they could solve this without further violence, they had to try for it. "So, what kinds of things are on Queen Hilda's list?" Dex asked. "Exactly what you'd expect," Sophie whispered. "She wants the ogres to turn over all their weapons and agree to stop any sort of offensive or defensive training. Wants them to surrender the borderlands they share with the goblins, and wants King Dimitar to turn over the ogre who killed Brielle. There were a bunch of other things that had to do with the previous treaty too, but I didn't understand a lot of it. So I gave copies to Mr. Forkle and Orly, and they're going to see if they can help me." "Are you going to support the list?" Bianna asked. Sophie shrugged. She understood why Queen Hilda was drawing such hard lines, but she kept thinking about what Lady Cadence had tried to tell her, about how the new treaty would destroy fundamental aspects of the ogre's culture. She had zero sympathy for King Dimitar, but she knew thousands and thousands of innocent ogres would be affected, including the children she'd seen running around during her time in Ravagog. Let's just say I'm glad I still have some time to decide, she mumbled, wishing it were longer. The council was sticking with their scheduled date, so she only had about a week and a half left. I swear, this whole thing is way more involved than I realized. Did you guys know that summits last multiple days? I got this, packet saying Adeline and I will have our own room in the castle, and luggage isn't allowed. So we both had to send the council our measurements, and they'll provide several changes of clothes. Ooh, Bianna breathed. I bet they'll make you the most gorgeous dresses. Will you get to keep them? If I do, they're yours, Sophie promised. And here, I thought you guys must be discussing important stuff, Marella said, rolling her bright blue eyes as she shoved her petite frame into the center of their group. But apparently we're standing in a suspicious-looking circle surrounded by goblins so we can discuss clothes. Does this mean you're talking to us again? Bianna asked. It means I'm talking to you today, Marella countered. And only because I realized you guys were never going to leave me alone until you got what you wanted. So, she checked over her shoulder and lowered her voice. Since my mom was actually having a pretty good day yesterday, I thought, fine, I'll ask her about Syra and prove she doesn't know anything. Only, her eyes dropped to her feet, kicking at her scuffed shoes. I guess she does remember something. And that something is? Dex prompted. Marella twisted one of her braids around her fingers. I'll tell you what I know if you do something for me. You know that's blackmail, right? Fitz asked. Or maybe it's extortion? Either way, it's super shady. Marella shrugged, unconcerned. Why don't we find out what she wants before we get mad? Bianna suggested. Clearly you're the smart Vacker, Marella said. And what I want shouldn't be a big deal. I just need to meet with this mysterious Mr. Forkle guy you're always talking about. Why? Sophie asked. That's between him and me. Not if you want to set up a meeting, Sophie argued. He'll never agree without knowing the reason. Marella sighed, twisting her braids tighter. He's the one who triggered all of your abilities, right? Most of them, Sophie corrected. And she had a sinking suspicion she knew where Marella was going with this. Marella confirmed it a second later when she crossed her arms and arched an eyebrow. Then I want him to trigger mine. That concludes Chapter 62. I'll see you tomorrow for 63 and 64. Bye!